On November 11th, 1620, 41 adult male colonists, including two indentured servants, signed the Mayflower Compact, although it wasn't called that at the time. It is unclear who wrote the Mayflower Compact, but the well-educated separatist and pastor William Brewster is usually given credit.
One now famous colonist who signed the Mayflower Compact was Miles Standish. He was an English military officer hired by the Pilgrims to accompany them to the New World to serve as a military leader for the colony. Standish played an important role in enforcing new laws and protecting colonists against unfriendly Native Americans. The Mayflower Compact created laws for Mayflower pilgrims and non-pilgrims alike for the good of their new colony.
This short document established that the colonists would remain loyal subjects to King James despite their need for self-government, that the colonists would create and enact laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and offices for the good of the colony and abide by those. The colonists would also create one society and work together to further it, and the colonists would live in accordance with the Christian faith.
The political development of the colony began with the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, a civil covenant by the settlers establishing the system by which the river towns of Wisners, Hartford, and Wethersfield agreed to govern themselves. The orders created an annual assembly of legislators and provided for the election of a governor. This would be America's first formal constitution.
The Virginia House of Burgesses was the first form of representative government in the original colonies. In 1643, Governor Sir William Berkeley split the House as a separate chamber. Just like the British House of Commons, the House of Burgesses granted supplies and originated laws.
The Stamp Act Congress was formed in response to the Stamp Act of 1765, which raised taxes on all colonial, commercial, and legal papers. The Stamp Act Congress was convened in New York 1765 by moderate representatives of 9 colonies to frame resolutions of rights and grievances, and to petition the King and Parliament for repeal of the objectionable measure.
The Committee of Correspondence was American colonies' means for maintaining communication lines in the years before the Revolutionary War. In 1764, Boston formed the earliest Committee of Correspondence to encourage opposition to Britain's stiffening of customs enforcement and prohibition of American paper money. The following year, New York formed a similar committee to keep the other colonies notified of its actions in resisting the Stamp Act.
The Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union was an agreement among the 13 original states of the United States of America that served as its first constitution. The Articles of Confederation served as the written document that established the functions and national government of the United States after it declared independence from Great Britain.
With the passage of time, weakness in the Articles of Confederation became apparent. Congress commanded little respect and no support from state governments anxious to maintain their power. Congress could not raise funds, regulate trade, or conduct foreign policy without the voluntary agreement of the states. But it did offer the first chance to experience unity, and it encouraged trade, and it gave the colonies a chance to go global.
From 1774 to 1789, the Continental Congress served as the government of the 13 American colonies and later the United States. The First Continental Congress, which was comprised of delegates from the colonies, met in 1774 in reaction to the Coercive Acts, a series of measures imposed by the British government on the colonies in response to their resistance to new taxes.
I call this meeting to order. Order.
This is the first annual meeting of the Second Continental Congress.
This piece of parchment officially establishes the previous members of the First Continental Congress to the Second Continental Congress.
All right. All members in favor of this proclamation say aye.
Aye!
Representative from Georgia, what is your vote for the Second Continental Congress?
Yeah!
Constitutional Convention of 1797 addressed the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton and other notable representatives held a secret meeting to revise the Articles of Confederation.
Virginia's large state plan proposed the abolition the Articles of Confederation and created a new form of government, under which representation in both houses of a bicameral Congress be essentially based on population, an arrangement that would naturally give more representation to larger states. New Jersey's small state plan called for equal representation of the states in a unicameral Congress regardless of the population or size. The delegates arrived with this conclusion of the Great Compromise or Connecticut Compromise, which formed a new national government with 3 branches as a checks and balances system.
(1776) The Declaration and Constitution were drafted by a Congress and a convention that met in the Pennsylvania State House in Philadelphia, known as the Independence Hall, in 1776 and 1787. The Bill of Rights was proposed by the Congress that met in the Federal Hall in New York City in 1789.
1777. After considerable debate and alteration, the Articles of Confederation were adopted by the Continental Congress on November 15, 1777. This document served as the United States' first constitution and was in force from March 1st, 1781 until 1789, when the present-day Constitution went into effect.
On June 21st, 1788, the Constitution became the official framework of the government of the United States of America, when New Hampshire became the 9th of 13 states to ratify it.
Okay guys, I got the paper. We gotta change the Articles of Confederation, guys. Okay. Okay, it's been ratified. Alright, I'll sign first.
Okay, I didn't look the entire time.
Alright, perfect.
John Locke disproved the theory of the divine right of kings and argued that all persons are endowed with natural rights to life, liberty, and property, and that rulers who fail to protect those rights may be removed by the people by force if necessary. His essays on religious tolerance provided an early model for the separation of the church and state.
Montesquieu conceived the idea of separating government authority into 3 major branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. The perspective significantly influenced the authors of the Constitution in establishing laws and divisions of duties, and also in the inclusion of provisions and preserve individual liberties.
The Constitution was based on the Virginia Declaration of Rights, the English Bill of Rights, the writing of the Enlightenment, and the rights defined in the Magna Carta. The Bill of Rights contains rights that many people today consider to be fundamental to America.
The Federalist Papers are a 95 essay series arguing in support of the Constitution. Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay were the authors of these pieces.
James Madison, America's 4th president, made a major part into the ratification of the Constitution. He was referred to as the father of the Constitution.
Alexander Hamilton made his reputation during the Revolutionary War and became one of America's most influential founding fathers. He was an impassioned champion of a strong federal government and played a key role in defending and ratifying the U.S. Constitution.
John Jay was an American statesman, patriot, diplomat, founding father, abolitionist, negotiator, and signatory of the Treaty of Paris of 1783. He served as the 2nd governor of New York and the 1st Chief Justice of the United States.
The time was right for philosophers and scholars who promoted democracy and justice through discussions of individual liberty and equality. The ideals of the 18th century philosophers inspired the founding fathers to revolt against what they perceived as unfair British taxation.
Good evening, James Madison.
Good evening, Benji.
How are you on this fine evening?
Quite exquisite.
Good deal, sir.
Good evening, James.
Good evening, Hamilton.
Have you considered the ideas of the Magna Carta, the Virginia House of Burgesses, the Enlightenment, or the Fundamental Orders to put into our Constitution?
I have not. Those are some great ideas, Hamilton.
We shall start the Constitution with these three powerful words. We, the people.
What an extravagant idea, Benji!
Indeed.
We, the people.
Indeed.
A preamble is a statement that sets forth the goals and purposes that the government will serve. The preamble to the Constitution of the United States of America lays out the 7 basic goals the Constitution will address.
A show-stopping opening phrase emphasizes the unity and resolve of all citizens of the newly formed nation. The famous phrase, "We the people," makes the Constitution the creation of the American people, not the states.
The words "the United States" again emphasizes unity, by virtue of the actual name for the newly formed nation. The nation no longer consisted of colonies, instead it consisted of individual but united states.
These words reflect the determination to address the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation and form a strong union of many individual states.
To establish justice was to determine rights and administrate laws that were just or fair to all citizens.
The aim to achieve a state of peace and quiet, free from stress or violence at home.
The ability to defend the rights and lives of the citizens of the United States.
Aiding or promoting well-being for the common good. The ability to undertake governmental provision of economic assistance to persons in need.
Liberty was seen as a means of happiness which promoted prosperity and welfare for the present and for all time.
The Constitution provided the framework for a government to make, execute, and interpret the laws of the new nation.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
The 6 principles of the Constitution.
Popular sovereignty. People establish government and are at the source of its power. This basically means that the government can only exercise authority if it has been given permission to do so by the people. Limited government. The powers and the functions of the government are restricted by the U.S. Constitution as well as other laws. This allows individuals in the United States to ensure they have personal freedoms about their money, property, and personhood. It also limits the amount of taxes that a government can impose on a single individual or entity. Separation of powers. Separation of powers divide the responsibilities of government among 3 branches. This helps ensure that not one branch is more powerful than the others. These branches include the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Checks and balances. Checks and balances keep each branch from taking control or imposing its will on the other branch. Each branch has its own role. Legislative makes laws, executive enforces and carries out laws, and judicial evaluates laws. Judicial review. Judicial review is the power to determine whether the actions of the legislative and executive branches of government are constitutional. It wasn't until 1803, during the case of Marbury v. Madison, that judicial review was firmly established in the Constitution.
Federalism. Federalism is when the powers of government are distributed between the national and state governments. For example, the national government could be responsible for its borders, while the smaller residents are responsible for their local issues and concerns.
The Founding Fathers now had to get the states to agree to ratify the Constitution and to vote in its favor. On September 17, George Washington was the first to sign the Constitution. Of the 55 delegates, a total of 39 signed. Some have already left Philadelphia, and George Mason and Edmund Randolph of Virginia and Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts refused to approve the Constitution. In order for the Constitution to become law, it then had to be ratified by 9 of the 13 states.
James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, with assistance from John Jay, wrote a series of essays to persuade people to ratify the Constitution. The 85 essays, known collectively as the Federalists, detailed how the new government would work. People who supported the Constitution became known as Federalists, while those who opposed it were anti-federalists.
Beginning on December 7th, 1787, 5 states, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, and Connecticut, ratified the Constitution quickly.
Other states like Massachusetts opposed as it failed to reserve undelegated powers to the states and lacked constitutional protection of basic political rights, such as freedom of speech, religion, and the press. In February 1788, a compromise was reached under which Massachusetts and other states would agree to ratify the Constitution. The Constitution was ratified in Massachusetts, followed by Maryland and South Carolina. On June 21, 1788, New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify the document.
George Washington was inaugurated as America's first president on April 30, 1789. In the same year, Virginia ratified the Constitution and New York followed in July. On February 2, 1790, the U.S. Supreme Court held the first session, marking the date when the government was fully operative. Rhode Island, the last holdout of the original 13 states, finally ratified the Constitution on May 29, 1790.
The order the states were ratified in are Delaware was first, then Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maryland, South Carolina, New Hampshire, Virginia, New York, North Carolina, and finally Rhode Island.
The Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton, were the first political party of the United States. They supported the Constitution and wanted to ratify the document. Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison anonymously published a series of essays known as the Federalist Papers.
At first, Hamilton and Madison thought that the Constitution didn't need a Bill of Rights. They thought it would create a barrier that limited the rights of the people instead of protecting them. However, they eventually made a compromise and were willing to take up the series of amendments which became the Bill of Rights. Without this compromise, the Constitution may never have been ratified.
The Anti-Federalists, or those opposed to the Constitution, were small farmers, landowners, shopkeepers, and laborers. The people that led the Anti-Federalists were Samuel Adams, Richard Henry Lee, and Patrick Henry. The Anti-Federalists opposed the Constitution because they thought if there was a new government, it would be too powerful and give the people less liberty.
I can't wait to ratify this Constitution.
I can't wait for our new government. No, we need a Bill of Rights.
But won't that limit our freedom?
No, it will protect us.
Fine.
Ugh, my porridge is too hot.
Rhode Island resistance to the Constitution was so strong that a civil war almost broke out. Many states struggled to decide which side they were on. Finally, after a long debate, they came up with the Massachusetts Compromise. As a result, the Constitution was enacted and Congress sent 12 amendments to the states. 10 of these amendments were immediately ratified into the Bill of Rights.